$100 million, 9 days of trial, 2 race teams against the biggest sanctioning body in American motorsport, and when Michael Jordan finally shook hands with NASCAR on that settlement back in December, every analyst in Charlotte called it the end of the war. They were wrong, because buried in that settlement in the fine print nobody's reading on this side of the Pacific is a clause that just turned Shane van Gisbergen into the most dangerous free agent threat in the Cup Garage and Trackhouse Racing. Justin Marks's mob, they might not even realize the trapdoor's been built under them yet. I'm going to show you exactly how MJ's lawsuit, a fight SVG, had nothing to do with, just handed our bloke the keys to walk out the door, and why Hendrick Motorsports is already circling. Stick with me, this one's a ripper. Right, quick recap and I'll keep it flat out because the legal stuff isn't the story. The story is what it did to Trackhouse. 23XY and Front Row refused to sign NASCAR's 2025 charter deal. They sued, federal antitrust case, Jordan's name on the paperwork because, well, of course it was. That's how you get headlines from CNN to stuff.co.nz. After 13 months of mudslinging, on the 9th day of trial, both sides folded. Settlement. Terms confidential, except for one massive concession NASCAR coughed up: permanent charters. Evergreen, no more expiry date, no more "we'll renew you if we feel like it." Now here's where every American pundit stopped reading and went back to talking about Bubba Wallace. But if you're a Trackhouse fan, or more specifically, if you're an SVG fan watching from Auckland or Adelaide, this is the moment the ground shifted under your feet. Because a permanent charter doesn't just protect a team, it transforms what that charter is worth. And when an asset suddenly doubles in value overnight, the bloke driving the car gains leverage he never had before. Let's be fair, dinkum, about something. Trackhouse, before all this, they were the fair lap of the Cup Garage, the outsider. Justin Marks built that team in 2021 with Pitbull money and a chip on his shoulder. And within 2 years, they were knocking off Hendrick and Gibbs cars on road courses. They imported a 3-time Supercars champ off the back of a Chicago Miracle, and the establishment had to pretend they weren't sweating. But watch what's happened since the lawsuit dragged on through 2025. Trackhouse's results got patchy. Daniel Suarez parted ways at the end of the year. Ross Chastain went cold for stretches, and SVG, bloody SVG, was the only consistent fire in the whole operation. Watkins Glen last weekend, stage 2 win, full race win, the lot. The man is single-handedly carrying a team that's been bleeding focus into a Charlotte courtroom for a year and a half. Here's the pattern interrupt nobody's saying out loud. While Marks was watching depositions, SVG was quietly becoming the single most valuable road course driver in the sport. And valuable drivers, especially ones whose teams are distracted, start to look around. But hang on, I hear you yelling at your phone. SVG signed a multi-year extension in August. He's locked in. Yeah, he did. Multi-year. Trackhouse announced it before the trial even started. And on the surface, that looks like loyalty. Looks like SVG planting the flag, building a life in North Carolina, telling the establishment, "I'm here to stay." But think about the timing, mate. August 2025, before the appeal court overturned the injunction, before the trial, before NASCAR caved on permanent charters. Driver contracts in this sport almost always have performance clauses, sponsor clauses, and critically charter status clauses. Because if your team loses its charter, you're driving an open entry, no guaranteed start, no locked-in money. Every clever agent in motorsport writes an escape hatch for exactly that scenario, which means SVG's extension was signed under one set of rules, and we're now living under a completely different set. Now, this is where I'm going to lose half the comments section. Doesn't matter. Here we go. Hendrick Motorsports has a problem. Kyle Larson is their ace, but he's not getting any younger, and he keeps wandering off to the Indy 500. Chase Elliott is the most popular driver in the sport, but hasn't won a championship in 6 years. William Byron is brilliant but quiet. And Alex Bowman, Look, he's a lovely bloke, but he is not the long-term answer. What Hendrick desperately needs is a road course assassin who can grab them stage points on 6 or 7 tracks a year and serve as a championship insurance policy. There is exactly one driver on planet Earth who fits that brief, and he's currently wearing a Trackhouse fire suit. And here's the conspiracy bit, the part nobody's telling you. Hendrick was one of the 13 teams that signed NASCAR's charter deal early. They played ball. They cooperated. They got rewarded. Trackhouse signed too, but they're a younger organization with less political capital in the garage. If a charter were ever to quietly change hands through mutual agreement, through a buyout, through any of the backroom mechanisms that this sport has always run on, the bigger fish are first in the queue. Permanent charters made every charter a tradable, valuable, forever asset, which means Trackhouse's charter is now worth maybe $40–50 million on the open market. Justin Marks built that team on pitbull money and grit. At some point, somebody is going to make him an offer. And if that happens, SVG's contract tied to Trackhouse's charter status gets very, very interesting. Here's something the U.S. NASCAR media will never say out loud, but we will. There is a quiet discomfort in parts of the American garage about what SVG represents. The bloke turned up in 2023, won on debut in the rain on a street course, and made a generation of Cup regulars look like they'd never seen a wet curb. Then he dominated the Xfinity road course slate in 2024. Then he won Cup races at Mexico City and the Glen. He didn't come up through Legends cars in North Carolina. He didn't do his time on dirt in Iowa. He came from the supercars paddock at Bathurst and made it look easy. That's threatening. It rewrites the myth of the sport. And there are powerful people who would much prefer SVG stays at a mid-tier team where his ceiling is fun road course specialist rather than at Hendrick, where his ceiling is championship contender who happens to speak with a Kiwi accent on victory lane. Keeping him at Trackhouse in a way keeps him contained. The settlement was supposed to be about Jordan and Polk and antitrust law, but the second-order effect, the unintended consequence, is that it's quietly made SVG's exit not just possible, but financially logical for everyone involved. All right, let's bring it home. Why should you, watching this in Hamilton or Geelong or out the back of Toowoomba, actually care? Because for the first time in the modern era, we have a Southern Hemisphere driver who is genuinely, legitimately on the cusp of breaking the American stock car ceiling, not as a curiosity, not as a one-off road course ringer, as a full-time charter-protected championship-capable threat, and the decisions made in the next 12 months by Marks, by SVG's management, by Rick Hendrick himself, will decide whether that ceiling gets smashed or whether SVG spends the rest of his career as a really good number 2 at a really good number 2 team. The lawsuit is over, the settlement is signed, but the aftershocks have only just started rolling through the garage, and our bloke is sitting right on the fault line. So here's the question I want you to actually sit with. If Shane van Gisbergen walks away from Trackhouse, the team that took the punt on him, that put him in a cup car when nobody else would, that built a program around his strengths and signs for Hendrick Motorsports for a shot at a championship, is he a traitor or is he a genius for reading the board faster than everyone else? Loyalty's a beautiful thing in motorsport, but championships don't get won on loyalty. They get won on timing. Drop your call in the comments. Traitor or genius, one word, no waffle. I'll be reading every single one of them. Hit the subscribe button if you reckon we called this one before the American press did, and I'll see you for the next deep dive.